Okay, so on to part 8 of Notes for the New Gamer. This is probably the biggest question asked anytime someone starts a game. Where do I start? What do I buy? In the case of Malifaux, what box set do I start with? And this is a very complex question. There are a number of ways to slice the pie on this one, and so much of that is going to be subjective or is going to be personal, and it should be. That it's very hard to get advice. It's very hard to accept advice at face value because people will, with their preferences, will inject that into their advice. So what I wanted to try today was using an acronym to help you make the decision for yourself. And my acronym happens to be A.D.V.I.C.E. So a couple things I should note. This A.D.V.I.C.E. does not include pieces like the social element of gaming. Based on the way certain crews work, they may not be considered the friendliest crews to play against a new player or a fresh opponent. So just bear that in mind. And again, I mean, there are so many different factors that go into this decision that my advice only includes some of the more common ones. So. One of the easiest ways to select crews is by aesthetics. It's by looks. When you ask a gamer, what should I pick? One of the first answers out of their mouth is, pick models that look cool to you. And frankly, that's not bad advice. Considering you don't know much about the game yet, and you do know you probably have interest in the hobby section, or the hobby portion of the game, selecting a crew based on how they look is going to be a good bet. These are going to be models that you're going to be building, painting, working with, looking at all the time, and dealing with. So aesthetics is a good way to go about it if you are very low on information, and just a good practice in general. One thing I should point out with aesthetics, though, is sometimes you can tell a lot about a crew based on how it looks. So, if a crew looks fast, but you don't see a lot of weapons on them, that might be true. If a crew has a lot of guns, swords, knives, you would expect them to be maybe a combat-based crew. So you can actually learn at least a little bit about how a crew is going to play based on aesthetics. And aesthetics is a good way to go, and to many of us, myself included here, it is one of the most critical factors in selecting a crew or faction. Another thing to consider when you're selecting your box set is depth. Depth is really about player skill, and it's about commitment. What you have to ask yourself is, how much time are you willing to invest in learning a crew, and how much reward do you expect from that? So depth is really, your investment into the crew, mentally doing research. What's more important to you, I guess, is the question here. Would you rather have a rules-intense crew that requires you to know a lot about the game but is going to reward you in a big way and provide a reasonable challenge? Or are you more interested in maybe a more straightforward crew or a more combat crew? So for me, I would rather have the steep learning curve and learn a game inside and out and be rewarded for that. Whereas, I've talked to plenty of players that are saying, look, I just want to play Malifaux and I want to put cool-looking models on the field, and I hope that those models can take care of themselves and I can run up and smash people in the face. And that's completely valid as well. So depth is one thing you want to consider when you're looking at these box sets and how much you're willing to commit. Next up, value. What is valuable to you? what type of value do you look for when you're looking at a box set? Do you want to, for example, get the most points out of that box set with the fewest amount of models, therefore relieving you of the responsibility of having to pick up lots of models to fill in for a game? Is that one kind of value that you should consider? What about just not having what I would call box bloat? A lot of box sets, battle forces, whatever you call it, whatever you want to call it, have models or pieces that may not be considered very efficient, so maybe you don't get good value out of that box. So what's valuable to you? That's another part, in addition to just the pricing. I mean, how much do I pay? How much do I get out of there per model when I buy the box? So value is another aspect that you want to consider. Immersion, or the fantasy role-play element of the game. This is another good tool to make judgments off of. A lot of us are into the tabletop gaming hobby because of things like fluff, background, character development, and we get it. We form an attachment or a fandom for those characters, those armies that we enjoy reading the fluff about. We enjoy the background of whatever it is that we want to play. And this is one of those that you can make your box set selection from without having to dive heavily into the rule set. So this is another one up there with aesthetics is, okay, do you really like the fluff in the background of a model or a crew, and how important is that to you? So immersion is another powerful tool that some of us use in selecting box sets. Competition is another major motivator for selection of a crew, box set, army, or whatever. Now, this is, again, has to do with the particular strengths of the player. So you are going to find crews that are more competitive for you than other folks will. So there's some subjective quality to this. Some might argue that there are quote-unquote top-tier forces or top-tier crews. I don't really know where I stand on that. I do feel that there are certain game-altering effects that might be considered a little powerful, but I don't know, really where I stand on top tiering and so forth. I do feel that a lot of that is fairly subjective, but anyway, my point being, this is yet another major factor in selection of a crew. How competitive do you expect your crew to be? What are you willing to invest or paint or learn in order to have that competitive level? Or maybe it's the opposite. Maybe you want the competition or the challenge of taking on a crew that you might not particularly be strong with naturally. So maybe that's a level of competitiveness that you might select as well. Finally, I wanted to talk about expansiveness, or the exploratory expansive portion of building a crew. This is a particularly powerful motivator for model collectors and hobbyists that want to generate or build up a reasonably sized collection of models and still want to be able to play with them as a cohesive force. So some of these box sets, some of the crews are going to allow for a wide array of models and many different ways to branch out with the same particular master. Some of them may be a little bit more rigid in their approach, and maybe in the case of like a henchman might be a little bit more restricted than a regular master. So expansion can be a motivator as well. Again, the opposite of that might be, back to our comment on value, maybe you want to buy a box that you can build a crew out of quickly you know exactly what you're going to buy, and that will fill out the crew exactly how you want. So expansion, again, this is something that you can cut many different ways, but it is a motivator in selecting your crew. So when you're contemplating what box set you're going to buy, and you went through the major criteria, which includes some of the stuff that I've presented here, one of the things that you're probably going to want to do is prioritize that criteria. Now, maybe immersion isn't as important to you as having a big expansive type list. Maybe value is the most important thing. Or maybe it's just picking a faction that maybe your friends aren't going to play and you want to play that one. So there are a lot of different factors. Obviously, your priorities may change once you get past your first crew or as you start to get into the game. But anyway, for our discussion, what you want to do is prioritize what's important to you. Start taking some things out of the equation as they lose their importance until you find one type of crew that's going to fit most, if not all, of your major criteria, and you have your decision. So hopefully this discussion has given you some food for thought as far as how you might go about selecting that critical first crew. And I do consider that to be critical, a critical choice that all gamers, especially new gamers, need to make when they're first entering the game. It's typically the one that you consider first, even though I would caution you to look at some other things like study the rulebook or get a hold of some rules, go through a demo, talk to friends, talk to people, other gamers that have experienced the game before you automatically jump in and start to look at crews. Even though I know you're going to want to just look at crews. It's a critical decision because this is really your gateway or your entry point into this particular game. And other gamers, the experienced gamers around you, I would caution, or I would actually suggest to them that they take your decision fairly seriously as well, because they're going to want you to stick around. They're not going to want you to make a poor decision, end up spending money, not enjoying what you get, and not being able to play the game with you. So this is a pretty critical decision, and it's one that is very subjective. This is one that you're really going to need to learn how to follow your own advice and organize your advice and take inventory of what you want, what you're expecting, and what you need for your game. So anyway, that's it for this section. Hope that this provided some help to somebody out there, and let me know if there's anything I can help address or talk about. Thank you.